Welcome to the Room of Lives. I'm your host, Neil. In this last part of my conversation with neuroscience student May, we talk about nonverbal communication in partner dance and wrestling, and also about vulnerability. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I feel like what I feel like talking about next is a little bit of a departure from our previous topic, and it's about nonverbal.
Oh, okay, it's a different one. I thought we were going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I want to talk about the poly stuff, which we haven't talked about yet.
There was a good sequitur in the relationships talk we had earlier about poly stuff, because you were talking about being open, but you're ready to do some nonverbal communication.
I'm ready for
let's hit the nonverbal communication.
And as you kind of pointed out, the paradox is that what are we fucking gonna talk about using words about nonverbal communication? But I think as long as you're preaching to the choir, nobody needs to say anything about nonverbal communication. But I feel like you have to imagine that you're speaking to the people who are in the world of verbal communication, advertising nonverbal communication. So
that's a wonderful
to
setup.
That world,
I like that.
I think it is important to put it in words as a gateway. Hello, guys. This is the verbal gateway into the world of nonverbal communication. So it's a little bit of an invitation. You have to meet them where they are.
Come, give me a hug.
Yes.
You would like a hug?
Yeah.
Here's
so
one.
What is the verbal hug from the nonverbal world? Why do you feel like it's important?
I'll start with a little bit of a preface, which is that
especially from someone who's so verbally articulated.
Yeah, that's actually part of the preface. I think as a young person, everything's a spectrum, but I think that I have a couple of autistic traits. Some of it being, like my mom would say, I think sometimes you don't know how you come across, and this feeling of like. I would say things to people and be kind of like emotionally detached from the impact of the words. I didn't realize what they hit. So I think and it's a very autistic trait to want to communicate hyperverbally, and I think social interaction was kind of tough for me as a young person. And I would get around the difficulty by going meta. I would just discuss the framework that we were in. I would discuss the structure of the thing that we were engaging with. So, going back to, this is now almost 2 hours ago in our conversation, you asked me, it's amazing how you can say these things so easily, as if but you have spent so much time working with them, they seem so complicated, but you just say them as if it's someone wrote it for you and you're just reading it. And so I think that's something that I practiced a lot when I was younger, was I felt very far away from everybody else. And I didn't know how to bridge that gap to them. And I didn't feel like the environment didn't seem to show me that they could bridge that gap to me. And so the best way that I learned to do it was becoming hyperverbal and being very explicit. And it did, I think, in some ways.
That was one of your strong points, probably. It was hey, I can do this word thing. So let me try and use that as much as I can to build this communication bridge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it worked well for me with people who were conducive to this verbal style, who liked discussing things in a meta perspective. So I would often go above myself and say, I'm feeling this. I see that you're feeling this, which was actually kind of an empathetic way to discuss, but it was a bit dissociative as well, where I would dissociate myself from the situation and then discuss it in a bit more of a stepped back point, which was often a very easy way to get to understanding. It was kind of vulnerable, but not always it wasn't painfully vulnerable, and it worked really well.
Did you say it was an easy way to get to understanding?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I think it was.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a preface from my background, which is that I was a very hyperverbal person as a young person. I talk a lot. I'm still very verbal. I like to talk. I enjoy communicating with people. But actually, I think what I enjoy is communicating with people, and talking just seems to be everyone's preferred mode of communication a lot of the time. It's very effective. You can get a lot across. But this takes me to kind of the intro to the welcome to nonverbal communication, which is that I do a lot of partner dancing.
Yeah.
I do blues and fusion and swing and zouk, and I've done a little bachata. So kind of all of these different cultural styles of dance. And swing includes like Lindy Hop. People are sometimes more familiar with that. And I think the crazy thing about doing a partner dance with someone, and I mean, you'd be blown away if I took you to a partner dance event if you've never been to one. Like, just the choreography that it seems like people have, like that, just like with people they don't even know.
I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah,
I've been to a couple of events. I've been to some contact improv.
Yep, that's
also.
another form. Yeah. So you have these. My mom, I taught her how to partner dance a little bit, and she's like, she'll say this all the time to people when she talks about it. She's like, it was amazing how people would come up to each other and they'd have this like amazing dance where like they were on the same page so much, and they'd walk away from each other at the end like they didn't even know each other at all. And the answer is probably that they didn't. And she was just blown away by this, that people could communicate so fluidly, easily, and dynamically in such a beautiful way without even having to speak any words to each other, without having to know each other at all. And I love it. So I've been doing partner dance for almost 8 years now. I think one of the things that always astounds me about it is that I'll be in these communities where the way that, for those who aren't familiar with social dance, the way that partnered social dance tends to work, and you can, if you just Google like Lindy Hop near me or bachata or salsa near me, you'll find it.
Fucking tons of that in Austin.
And yeah, they love it there. And pretty much every major city in America, and lots of them in Europe. I'm not sure about, like, South Korea actually is like the strongest Lindy Hop scene in the world. I know.
Weird.
It's crazy. But so that's a bit of a tangent. But point being that people will show up to these events on their own, and then there's usually a class at the beginning that teaches you some basic vocabulary within the dance. So you still have to learn it like a language. And then they teach it to you. You rotate through random people that you don't really know, and you practice it with them. And then they have what's called a social dance, which is where they just play music, and you ask people to dance. You say, hey, do you want to dance? And then they say yes or no, and then you have this dance. And so you practice that vocabulary that you've been taught in your lessons. And it's very similar to learning a language, because you show up, you get taught vocab, you get taught grammar, you get taught structures, and then you have to go practice.
I think the sense and feeling of vulnerability is also the same.
It's also there, because you feel like you're in a country that's not familiar to you, like in a language that you don't speak.
Exposed.
Yeah, you are.
Like, I'm gonna fail.
Everyone is, and so I think a lot of what's really the hardest barrier to entry for partner dance is actually people come and they see people who have been doing this, they have worked at the thing, and they see them speak so fluidly, and they're like, I could never be that good, I'm so bad at it. And I'm like, dude, I could show you videos of me when I first danced. I looked so bad. I was awful. But you would not look at me today and think I ever could have looked like that. Like you would be like, you would not recognize the two dancers that I was. And every dancer is like that. And so you really just have to be willing to fail and to jump in and to be embarrassed, to be vulnerable, to keep trying. And you'll pick it up through osmosis. You just show up often enough and you know what you're doing now. But so that's kind of the preface. I think, I'm not sure if I finished out social dance, but it's, a bunch of people who don't know each other generally, who build a community where they get to know each other through the dance. And through interacting with one another, and sometimes you'll get people traveling from all over, so you meet people from all over the world from these kinds of hobbies. And I think that, like, the most stark thing to me has always been from it that, like, I don't spend a lot of time talking at partner dances. I mostly just dance. I just show up, I ask people to dance, and we'll introduce ourselves, we'll share names, I might know a little bit of backstory about them, and sometimes you get closer to people and you start seeing them outside of dance, you become friends with them. But actually, largely, most of my partner dance communities, which I've been part of many, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I know, I've never even had a conversation with. I've just danced with them. And I know their bodies, and I know how they inhabit themselves, and how they engage with the world, like, so intimately, and so, like, lovingly. And yet I have no idea what they like. I have no idea what they're interested in. I have no idea, like, what kind of humor they have, or what their accent is like, or where they're from. Like, I don't know any of the things that you usually know about the people that you're communicating with. And I find it so magical. Like, it's just it's so unlike any other form of communication that I know about. And there are people that I've gone months dancing with, where, like, my body's pressed up against theirs weekly. I know where they like to be touched, and I don't mean this in, like, a sexual sense, but just, like, I know what fits, like, where they can hear if I'm touching them there. Like if I'm connected to them at certain parts of their body, like they hear what I'm trying to say better, and I hear them better. And I mean hear, like it's like, it feels like hearing, because like, you know, they'll move and I can feel the torque change. You know, I can feel like the resistance of we're pushing or we're pulling or we're stretching or compressing, and like we're moving forwards or backwards. Like I can feel the changes in that flow. And it feels like language, because I'm like, oh, you know, normally when I feel this thing, it leads to this, you know. So there's like,
do you have any synesthetic tendencies? Like
oh
otherwise?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I
do?
do.
Oh,
Yeah.
We're coming to it.
Absolutely.
Well, before we get to that, another moment of me sharing vulnerably.
Okay.
So when we connected, you and I, it was through like pretty much a purely verbal exchange.
Entirely.
We're like, oh wow, this person and I are like exchanging these words. It's just great. And I think the world of words is a world where I know I'm like good at it.
Yeah, you are.
So it's like a pretty like the intellectual concepts.
And you're very insightful. You're good at seeing people, and people like that. They connect with it.
But when you sent me the email and you said the nonverbal thing and the dancing, I was like, I feel nervous. I feel nervous not about talking with you about it, because we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
But I feel nervous by the idea of all of this stuff that you're talking about, because I think it's outside my comfort zone.
Yeah.
One time I had a podcast interview with a teacher at a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And I invited him on my podcast, and I was asking him all these questions, and he repeated something that he had told me one time in one of the brief like one-on-one question answer sessions, which are the couple times that it punctuates the 10 days of silence. He said, Neil, I'm warning you, you are too intellectual. And he said, he said, I'm warning you, he was very intense. He was like, this is going to become a hurdle to your spiritual progress. You have
to learn to be a body.
Yeah, it was like, you are thinking about it too much. You're talking about it too much. You're questioning it, etc. And he gave me some examples of a couple of like one particular very smart academic person who just couldn't make headway into their meditation because their brain was filled with words about it.
They were trying too hard.
And so he said that to me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to not be very upset about it.
But it hurt. It was scary probably to hear that.
Yeah, a little bit. I was like, I don't think he really understands that I am not as purely intellectual as he thinks I am. But then when you're talking about all this stuff, I was like,
shit.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have stretched myself to nearly my fullest potential when it comes to this intellectual, conceptual, verbal world. But this is a world in which I have not stretched the rubber band.
Yeah.
And I can be very easily out of my self-assured, confident facade.
Yeah.
The moment I'm on the dance floor, and I'm
you're like, I don't know how to speak this language. I don't know how to move.
I look stupid.
Yeah.
And I
like
think
going back
part
to
of
being
me,
a toddler.
and I think a part of me is also scared of nonverbal intimacy.
Yeah. I think a lot of people
I keep
are.
going back to words.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you were saying is like, I will start telling them, this is how I'm feeling about this.
Yeah.
This is how you're feeling probably. And I think part of that is good, because I am trying to bring the emotions to the surface, but a part of that is intellectualizing the emotions, which funnily shields me from their full impact in a certain way and the full vulnerability.
Yeah.
I'm feeling so comfortable just talking about this right now, because it's words.
It's what you do,
It's words.
Well, and we're doing a podcast, and I wish that people could see me as I say what I say, because I think you're actually seeing a much more dynamic version of what I'm saying, because I'm speaking with my body, and I'm speaking with my hands, and I'm speaking with my shift in my posture. There's so much that carries us on this journey together that actually the audience doesn't get to see, because they can't see me. They can't interact with me. They can't touch me. And that's where a lot of me is. So much of me is in my body. And it's nice. I like it. I really like it.
So what should I do?
Go dance.
Do you have tips?
Go dance.
I do go dance.
Yeah?
And I do go dance a lot at like EDM stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not partner.
Yeah.
That's the thing that makes me nervous. It's like partner dancing.
Go have sex?
That also makes me nervous.
Well, yeah, it used to make me nervous. I think it still does make me nervous, but not for the same reasons. But I don't know. I think that's why I wanted to talk about nonverbal communication, is because I feel like we live in a society that's actually moving more and more towards hyperverbal. You know, social media. You have to write everything down. You have to explain it out. It is so damn exhausting.
It's a disembodying experience.
Yes, it is.
It's like your body is the last thing that matters on the list.
It's true, but actually, your body is where you, like, it is the core of who you are. You know, it is so. People like to think of it like this brain in a jar idea. It's bullshit. Like, you could not have a brain in a jar. Well, you could put a brain in a jar, but it wouldn't be a person like you or I.
But, you know, like, my take on that would be, even if you're a brain in a jar and this is a simulation, and inside the simulation you happen to have this thing called a body, which has this rich capacities for interaction with the environment, you should take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Bottom line is, why
and you should treat it well. You should take care of it. You should learn to communicate with it. Like, people need to learn to speak with themselves. And I don't mean just, like, talk in their minds, but, like, when you're anxious, sometimes you need to run. Sometimes you need to do some yoga. Sometimes you need to move just to get it out, you know, because, like, you don't have to only communicate with your mind with words and with thoughts. Like, you can communicate with actions, you know, like, if I'm upset with you, maybe we just wrestle. Like, maybe we just get in a fight, and, like, that's actually okay. You know, obviously there's lines. Like, violence is dangerous, right?
Yeah. I know my friend who's a physics PhD person, hyper intellectual. He said that the highlight of his day would be his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes.
Yeah. It's so fun.
Yeah.
It's nice to just struggle against something, and, like, you know, I being socialized male, I feel like I have a bit more of appreciation for, like, physical altercation. Because, like, sometimes me and my buddies, we're pissed at each other, we'll just wrestle it out. And, like, neither of us really wanted to hurt the other, but we just had to get it all out. You know, and I'm not an angry person, so it was never like it was very, very rarely coming from a place of anger. But it was just easier than, like, having to talk about what we felt and what we were thinking.
Yeah.
Like, we would just, like, we'll just wrestle it out. And then
there's
at the
just
end,
some pressure building in a different non-verbal mode that needs to happen in that mode.
Yeah.
And it cannot be substituted really by...
And actually, it was very releasing. Because, like, at the end, you didn't say any words, but you understand each other.
Yeah.
You feel... And you actually feel closer to each other. Like, you have each other's back. Where you're like, we've stood toe-to-toe, and we've wrestled it out. And we both came out okay, you know, and, like, now I've got your back, you know, like, it's a bonding moment in a way. And then there's other non-violent or non-aggressive versions of this too, you know, where, like, if you do something that is very kind to me, and I want to appreciate you for it, I could give you a hug, I could give you a kiss, I could do, you know, any number of things that's not thank you, Neil, and let me tell you what it meant to me. I can show you what it means to me. And some people, you know, this is like love languages stuff, where, like, some people actually really like communicating with their bodies and they prefer to be understated with their words. Some people really prefer to hear explicitly what it is, you know. But, like, when I'm joyous, I want to jump. When I'm angry, I want to punch. Like, I do have these physical connections to the world and to my body that get out the same emotion in a very different way, you know. When I'm in love, I want to kiss. I don't want to just tell them. I want to hold them. I want to move them. I want to pleasure them. Like, even when I'm engaging in something, like, intellectual and thoughtful, I feel like, you know, I like to walk. You know, the motion helps. Like, just doing anything, having my body be involved in the activity is so much fun. You know, like, as we're talking, I'm doing a lot of gesturing and, like, moving my hands around, and that's another form of us non-verbally communicating. That's,
you know, a quality that my best conversations have is I lose track of time. And, and
it's been 3 hours.
Definitely happening.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I'm always kind of nervous to bring up, like, the one about wrestling, like, the violence as an acceptable form of interaction. Because I'm not a violent person, and I don't condone being hurtful to others, you know, and I want to be clear that it's not, oh, when you're upset, you should just go punch people. Like, that's really not the case. But I think there is value in letting your frustrations out in a way that's not just talking about it, because the talking about it is so dissociated from what you're feeling. Whereas, like, you know, sometimes when people are angry, they'll go on a run, they'll go lift weights, they'll go, you know, swing a baseball bat and hit something, you know, or hit a ball. Like, you play sports to let out these these frustrations sometimes, or you know, to engage with your body. And so there's a spectrum, you know, and I want to live in a society where people have the freedom to communicate with one another non-verbally, whether it's good or bad, you know. Like I will not condone hurting others for the sake of hurting others, but if you want to wrestle it out, like, that's fine by me. And I don't think that, and I think there are some things that, like, should be, that, like, you shouldn't just get away with, like, you should punch fascists, you know, like, some things that should not be gotten away with, that like, you know, there's no amount of words that I can say to someone who wants to strip the rights of the majority of the world that will make them change their mind. I'm just going to deck them, because I want them to know that there's no place for that. You cannot get away with being that version of bad, that version of awful, without some consequence, you know. And actually, like, verbal consequence is really not that bad usually, like, or a systemic consequence, right? Like, deplatforming someone is a form of violence that is very effective. Taking away their ability to speak is so violent, more violent than me just punching them, actually. But it's more accepted because you haven't hurt the body, but you've hurt the mind and the soul and the connection to other. And I don't know. I think that this is a very deep and messy topic, actually, which I think gets away from what I appreciate about nonverbal communication. But I also just appreciate this side of things, you know, where, like, sometimes it's quicker to communicate with your body than your words sometimes, if you're willing and you're capable. I
mean, as humans, we're the end product of an evolutionary process where for a much, much longer time we evolved as our body than we did as our mind.
Absolutely.
And so at some point I was like, okay, I'm going to try this partner dancing thing a little bit, because one of my roommates got interested in it, and he used to have great difficulties, like, socially forming connections with, like, you know, words and whatever. And so he started getting really into partner dancing.
Nice.
And he was, like, trying to get me hooked as well. And I went in there, and the conclusion I reached was, you know, George, I have a easy enough time making connections in my life. I think this is an avenue where you have suddenly started discovering that non-verbally you're being able to now connect with people that you are verbally failing. And so for you, the cost to benefit ratio is really working out.
But for you, the cost is very high.
Yeah, I was like, the cost is kind of high for me, and the benefit is not that great.
Yeah.
And I kind of told myself, hey, So I tried it a couple times, and then I was like, okay, done. And I was like, you know what? And then you have to pay money to go to this class. Blah, 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 blah. I did that all the time. And I was like, I think I'm going to go back to my solo rock climbing.
Oh, that's great. Engage with your body.
Yeah, I do engage with my body, but I don't have to deal with other people. I don't think I want to deal with other people. So I had a set of reasons, and I think some of them are true. But I do feel like I don't think I can completely ignore this. I think there is something there that I am shying away from because I'm scared.
Like the partner dancing?
Yeah.
It's hard. It sounds like you have some fear about bearing your body with others.
Yeah.
It feels maybe a bit unnatural. Or at least unfamiliar.
I think I'm scared of being, like, physically very intimate and vulnerable.
Yes. And that's reasonable. A lot of people feel that way. Like, and there are some people who I feel worse with when I partner dance. Like, not all of my dances are good. Sometimes it's my fault, sometimes it's other people's fault. It's
and I'm pretty sure I'm going to make the other person feel, like, worse.
You should give yourself more credit. I think, you know, people don't care that much, and if your intentions are good, it's fine. And hopefully you're not letting your desires get the better of you, making people uncomfortable, because I think, like, the quickest way to be an uncomfortable dance is to bring sex in when it wasn't asked for.
No, it's for me the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like I'm being too wooden.
But then I think you're probably fine. People might think, well, he was a little awkward, but that's awkward. It, right? Like, they're not gonna. That you being awkward is not enough to damage someone else.
Yeah.
You know, usually.
Actually, partner dancing, because it is physical intimacy in a non-sexual context, is a little bit better because it's like a sandbox.
Safe. Yeah, you can play around.
Like,
You can get used to feeling your body interacting with others' bodies. I think
so
it's made me
maybe
a
I'm
much-
just thinking of an idea right now, but I could think of ideas a lot of the time and then they just fall by the wayside. Is I'm just now starting my like postdoc now, so it's like kind of like the beginning of a new phase of my life.
Good time
Maybe
to start
I'm
something
gonna,
new.
yeah, maybe I'm gonna try
Sure.
and go back to all the
Yeah.
Lindy Hop in and the
Yeah.
salsa in and the
I started with
whatever.
Lindy Hop, and I think Lindy Hop is a good dance to start with for a lot of people because it's very vocabulary focused. A lot of the time, it's you can really you can spend a long time just learning skills in structured ways without having to know how to do it on your own. Whereas like some other dances like blues or fusion are a lot more freeform, and it's really about like kind of finding your sense of yourself, which doesn't come as easily to people. And so like Lindy Hop offers a really nice structure that like you can have done the move right or done the move wrong and you will feel the difference. You know, salsa is another one that's like relatively structured. So I think it's about finding a music that speaks to you, that like you feel in your soul, and just sticking with it long enough to give it a real try. Because I think like actually you don't know whether you like it or not until you're good enough to actually social dance, which takes like maybe a month or 3, like of going every week, once a week. I think if you've attended 4 to 12 social dances for like a lesson and an hour of social dance, then you actually have learned enough and spent enough time thinking about it and practicing it that you'll start to have felt what it feels like to social dance. And not that everyone has to go social dance. There's tons of other ways that you can engage with body. You know, like I don't know what else I might say. Even playing sports is a form of nonverbal communication. You know, like just find something that lets you be in your body. Yoga's great. Rock climbing's great. I don't think there are many things that are so co-creative as like partner dancer sports with your bodies, where like you're working together to create something very nonverbal. But also those are not the only forms of nonverbal communication. Like we haven't talked about art. We haven't talked about music. Like music is like dancing. When I dance, I'm communicating with a lot of things at once. I'm communicating with myself and my body. I'm communicating with my partner and their body. And I'm communicating with the music. And the music is also communicating with my partner. And then they're conveying it through their body to me. And I'm feeling something from them, and it's like they're their own little instrument, and I'm my own little instrument, and we're playing like a little symphony with whatever the song is. You know, we're playing it together, and that is so fun. I love it.
I have a couple of friends who, you know, if you were not in the world of dancing or you didn't dance, you would think, okay, dancing, that's the thing, it's an activity, and the consequences of that remain limited to that world of your activity. But I have a couple of friends who have undergone complete life and personality transformations, and they're like fucking crazy about that, and they wouldn't shut up about it. And I was like, I think I understand. I think it's unlocking and releasing some energy in you that then starts to flow everywhere.
Yeah, you let yourself into your body, and you let yourself into other people's bodies, and it feels like you know, another
like everything changes about them. The way that they talk to people. How nervous they feel when giving like public talks now. Everything changes.
It's so life-changing.
How anxious they feel about their general life. Everything changes.
Yeah. There's so like, have you ever sang in large groups?
Like
maybe through I think the most often place is
not.
through like a place of worship. Through some spiritual context.
Oh, sang as a part of a large group.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
no.
Like, you have not?
I don't remember at least any recent times that I've done that.
So, you know, having been raised in Christianity, I went to these kind of like newer age churches that did a lot of singing, and like hymns are, you know, one thing, but we would do a lot of like more modern singing and things like that. But there's this feeling that I think that starts to well up inside of you when you're singing with a group and you're harmonizing with them. And in the context of worship, especially, of being in a place of worship, singing songs of worship, you are also feeding your spirituality very actively, like where you're trying to channel it. And you're channeling it with each other. And it's like the whole room rises. You go to a place that you can't get to just on your own. You know, it's like, it's beyond a meditation. It's like you start to see God. You start to see spirituality. And I don't mean like, oh, you see Christian God. You see life. You see the world. You see connection. You see people and souls. And like, this is God. This is life. It existence. You know, you start to see it and you feel it, and it like dance brings it. When you're sharing music in a group with people, you get high. Like by the end, I will dance for 8 hours straight. I will show up and just nonstop. I am engaging with bodies, and at the end, I feel high. Like just something generates inside of you that you can't get elsewhere when you have these communal experiences. And like singing in groups is often like this, or like being part of a jam circle with musical instruments. You enter this spiritual space where you are a body part in something larger than yourself, and that makes you feel so grand. Like you feel like you expand, your consciousness grows to fill the space, to fill the world, to mix with others. I think it's
kind of like a surrender of the tensed self too.
Yes,
like it's like
absolutely.
a kind of dissolution into your environment.
And it is spectacular. It is so wonderful. Oh, I like the good and the bad of everything a lot. No one likes feeling sad or feeling angry, I think, but a part of me enjoys it, and both of those things, appreciates both of those things, finds value in both of those things, and is therefore happy to engage with them. You know, I think sometimes I'm scared of that, and sometimes I'm scared of talking about that, because a lot of people really prefer to stay in the positive and the comfortable. But I don't know, I think it enriches my experience, and I want to have access to the whole range of communication with others. Like, I don't mind fighting with my friends. Like, and I don't mean physically fighting, I mean like arguing, you know, or something like that. Like, it means that we care about one another, and as long as we're still not trying to hurt each other, you know, like that's really the side of the coin that I won't go to, is like, at no point am I trying to hurt somebody, but that doesn't mean that I won't do things that are hurtful. You know, when you get in a fight, when someone says something that hurts you, you might say something hurtful back, and that's okay. But if it's a difference between doing something vengeful, something intended to hurt, versus something that happens to hurt. You know, and I think that this whole nonverbal communication and this spirituality and this dancing feels like I get to, like, there are times when I've held people in a dance and I can tell that they're somewhere, they're like in some piece of themselves that hurts, they're in a trauma, and I just can hold them through it, and they get to share. Like I found out about I watched a friend of mine experience their parents' divorce in a moment of a dance with them, where like I held them and I felt like their father for a moment, like hugging them, and it was a hug that they'd never gotten. And they didn't say that to me, but I just knew it was true. And later on, I found that was true, but like I just felt it, you know. They just showed it to me, and they came out of the dance crying, and they looked at me and they were like, "Thank you so much. I don't know what that was, but thank you." And it was, I didn't mind. I did not mind that they were sad or that they were hurting, and that they shared it with me, and I'm glad that I could be there with them. And I've had other dances that are like a bit more wrestly, where like someone's angry and they're like, they want to get thrown around, or they want to throw someone around, and like maybe I did a little bit too at that point, you know. Like, it's like, have you ever been in a mosh pit? Yeah, it's like being in a mosh pit where like you get sucked up in the soup, and like everyone in a mosh pit is being kind of violent. Like, they like crashing around and banging and pushing and kicking and everything, but no one's trying to hurt each other. Everyone's just letting it out, you know. And that's the kind of wrestling that I'm talking about. You know, it's I like those things. I think they're cool. You seem deep in thought.
No, I was very struck by the thing that he just said about the divorce thing.
The divorce?
Yeah.
Do you want to go back to it?
No. I just felt it. It was just like I was just absorbing it for a little bit.
Yeah, you can sit and absorb it.
Even verbally being vulnerable is something that has only been happening recently.
For you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like people don't get me. I'm always like listening.
Yeah,
holding their weight,
listener.
Blah blah blah, and that's all fine. That brings me some level of connection. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of the time it's like one way. At the end of the day, I'm like, well, you know, I don't think they'll get what's going on with me, and I'm not even going to try because they're not going to get it. And
sometimes you have to give people the chance to fail. You know, like not everyone will, But sometimes, a lot of times, people will surprise you, or they'll send you in a different direction. You know, like even just letting it out can be beneficial for you.
Exactly. So I started a couple people gave me this clue, and I started feeling it as well. I was like, Neil, I don't think you are in a place to honestly say that these people are failing you, because you're not giving them
the chance.
You're not even being vulnerable. Before you're even like 1% vulnerable, you have a picture in your mind of what the optimal thing would be for them to say if you were in their position, and you're like, you don't think they'll do it, and a lot of the times they won't. And I'm like, okay, well,
but they might
that
do something
person
else.
sucked, you know. That person sucked, and I'm never doing it again. So I'm always holding them up against a standard of how I would process that.
And you're actually you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you're also like you're limiting yourself from being surprised, you know, because oftentimes like you think you know what you need, but then actually someone will do something that is totally unexpected. It's not what you thought you needed at all. Like, and then it works.
You know, actually, I set the bar even lower than that.
What?
I was like, even if the other person is like a stone wall, it's going to be a better day that I was completely vulnerable.
It's true.
And I let out my emotions.
That's a good way to do it.
And it has started to work.
Yeah.
Once you get yourself free, you know, tied up with my emotions, once I've been like, you know, this happened, and I feel heartbroken and lost.
Yeah.
And then and it feels it's hard to say it.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, I was like, Neil, that was kind of cool that you said that.
That's badass, bro.
Yeah.
Hot girl shit.
Yeah, I feel like nicer about myself, you know? I feel like,
congrats.
It's a little bit like, you're like child Neil. How can I blame you about it?
You have to love child Neil.
Yeah.
You have to love them.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of used to struggle with the same thing, actually. The week that I first came out to people in public was I went to this week-long dance event. Yeah. And I met this girl because it was both of our birthday during the event. And we met, people had told us about one another earlier in the week, but we had never met before, that we had the same birthday. They kept telling us because they were knowing that we had birthdays. We didn't meet until the night of our birthday, past midnight, so it was beyond our birthdays. We're both fucking drunk at like 2 a.m. Just plastered. And it was one of those like times where you meet someone and you just like lock eyes and you're like, we're meant to be connected. We are like so connected right now. And so we celebrated the rest of our birthdays together, and for the rest of the conference, we were like literally inseparable. Like we moved into each other's rooms at the conference and just hung out. And at first it was very platonic. Turned out to be like a wonderful fling, one of my favorites that I've ever had. But there was a point when I was kind of getting vulnerable with her, and I had been listening to some of the things that she had struggled with, and you know, I said, you know, I have this problem where I love taking care of others. I love listening to their problems, but it's so hard for me to be vulnerable. It is so hard and I was still willing to share a lot of myself, but it was very hard for me to share things I was afraid of, you know, and be like genuinely vulnerable, because I don't think being vulnerable is like how much you tell someone about yourself. I think it's about what feels dangerous, what feels unsafe, or like what feels like something that if someone wanted to, they could hurt you with it. And when you're vulnerable, it's that you're trusting that they're not going to hurt you, that they're going to take care of you.
Or even if they do, I'm going to be okay.
You're going to be okay.
You know, like like how you were talking about before. It's like the deeper sense of
Yeah. So, long story short, she turns to me and she says, "Do you like it when people open up to you, share their stories?" I said, "Yeah. Oh my God, it's my favorite thing. Like it feels so good." And she said, and I like the way that she framed it, because it was particularly good for like an anxious and service-oriented person like I am. She said, refusing to be vulnerable in front of others is depriving them of the chance to take care of you. And I liked that reframing a lot, because it was what I think was so unique about it to me was the use of depriving. Like she was saying, you're actually committing a negative action by not giving them the chance to commit a positive one. And actually, like, you're taking this opportunity from them where you feel like you gain, you feel better because someone has shared something with you and been vulnerable with you.
Yeah, but my default expectation is that their response is going to be negative for me.
That was kind of mine too. I was always under the assumption that, like,
or at least like a disappointingly neutral one.
You should pick the right people.
Yeah.
You know, like you should use judgment, but I was always very afraid that I would be a burden to people, that like they didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to deal with it, like they didn't want to do emotional labor. So I gaslit myself away from ever having to be vulnerable. And I think that framing just meant a lot to me, like that actually people enjoy taking care of one another. People enjoy when you're vulnerable with them and when you share what hurts, because it gives them a chance to do something good, and people like to do good things. And you're gonna have people, like you said, who have a sadly neutral response. But actually, I think if you pick your moments right, and you're not just like, there's this phrase in Russian, "vkladovits kishki," and it means basically like to spill your entrails, to like open your stomach up. It's like spill your guts, but with a different connotation. Where spill your guts is kind of like talk about what you're feeling. "Vkladovits kishki" is like, that's gross. Why did you pull that out? You should not have put that on the table, and you've done it without someone's choice. Like you have just thrown this gross thing onto them. So one should not vkladovits kishki. One should not just like throw their entrails all over people. But that's not to say that. So it's again a balance. Walk the middle path. You have to try to find people who you think have shown you that they feel open.
You're still exercising your discretion and monitoring the vibes. And
absolutely.
It's like a feedback process.
Right.
You can just like, hello, random stranger. Here are my entrails. Or you don't like them?
Then it's not worth being vulnerable.
I think I am progressing now on this newly found path of becoming more verbally vulnerable.
Yes.
But physically,
you still feel like it's harder.
Yeah, I need to do something.
It's like moving. Remember, it's slow, and you make progress one thing at a time. And you can't move it all at once. But as long as you keep moving, eventually,
and I
you
don't
live in a
even
house.
know why this is an issue with me. I can't remember why.
Why do you think?
Like why? I don't know.
What is it, the issue that you're responding to? The feeling of like being afraid of being vulnerable, or
the physical,
the
physical intimacy and vulnerability. I don't know why it's a. Why?
Do you feel like it's something that you've had a lot of practice with? A lot of opportunities to be physically vulnerable.
There have definitely been quite a few opportunities that I've like passed up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the feeling of
chagrin
actually
of the
practicing
other person.
it. Oh no, they wanted it.
Yeah.
So it's.
I think I have had practice at a previous period of my life. That was still during grad school, but there's been a really long intermission since then.
And do you feel like you had negative experiences when you were vulnerable?
I think I am able to be physically intimate with someone when I'm feeling very like
safe.
When I'm feeling like I'm in charge. I'm like I am providing care.
Yes.
Yeah.
You feel like you have a use. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I'm like seeking care, it's very hard for me to feel like this person can give me the care. I'm just scared of looking weak.
Yes. It's hard.
Yeah.
There may be better advice, but the advice that I have is that you just have to be willing. You have to just decide to let it happen. Be weak. And practice it, and you'll find.
I think it's especially hard because very quickly I lock onto people with such a jigsaw puzzle-shaped relationship that I lock onto people where from the beginning my role is the caregiver.
Yes.
And then with these people in particular, it's like really hard to be weak. Yeah?
I think that we also seek out the relationships that we like best or that are good for our egos, And so if what you're afraid of is vulnerability, you're afraid of not feeling powerful and strong and dependable, you seek out relationships of people who need someone to be powerful and strong and dependable so that you feel validated in that action. People do this all the time, and there's nothing wrong with it. But being aware of what it is you're seeking out in others can often be a really strong indicator of what you are like. If you find that you're seeking out people, like I found that I was regularly seeking out people with a lot of emotional baggage, who needed someone to be there for them, who needed someone to decenter themselves and care for them and hold them up. And those people gave me some like comfort in my own problems, because even though they weren't helping me with them, they made me feel like it was okay for me to have them. And I get a lot out of helping people, so it felt like it was healing for me to help other people through their problems, because I learned from my own advice, honestly. Like I would be like, well, here's what I think you should do.
Yeah.
And then like I also was learning about what I would do. Like I was doing this hypothetical, this imaginary play, but actually at some point I kind of didn't like how it felt almost like condescending to some degree, that I was seeking out people who like I felt like I needed to save, or I needed to heal, or I needed to help. And I still want to heal and help people, but I don't want people to rely solely on me. You know, like I want to give people the tools to care for themselves, and I want to be loved and supported as well. And I don't want to come into people's relationship where like I feel like I want to create a perception for myself of myself where I'm great, I'm fantastic, and you need me, and I will save you, and look at all this good that I've done. Like I don't want that to be where I'm coming from anymore. So I tend to seek out relationships now where I'm learning from them as much as they're learning from me. You know, we're trading, we're working together, and so I'm not always the one on top. I'm not always the bigger person. I'm vulnerable and I'm weak, and that's okay, because that means I'm in a healthier relationship.
That was a Rick and Morty reference.
I didn't hear it. I kind of have to pee.
Thanks for joining me and May today in the Room of Lives. It's been cloudy in Austin for days now, and I think some of my plants are upset. Also, my friend Alicia is visiting. You want to just make a sound? Make a sound. Okay, that sound was Alicia. So my friend Alicia is visiting, and we went to the Cathedral of Junk after many years, and we went climbing at the Austin Bouldering Project. Tonight, we plan to go to Coconut Club to dance. One of my co-op mates works there, and he said he can let us in for free, even though I do not have a valid ID at the moment. As to why I don't have a valid ID, that's a really long story, which I don't want to talk about right now. Okay, cool. Take care. Until next time. Bye.